I lived through 7 years of chaos with my wife, and the truth almost destroyed our marriage. I'm 32, and my wife is 32. We dated in high school and got married 7 years ago. My wife has always been a scatterbrain. Before marriage, she was always misplacing things and leaving everything half-finished. She was chronically late, had clutter all over her living space, and would get bursts of frustration about these messes, which would lead to hyperactivity into not really doing anything conducive towards a solution. I love her anyway, but at times, it was tiring. I saw past that because I knew she was the woman I wanted to marry, and we got married when we were 25. Unfortunately, a lot of the problems that she had seemingly accelerated after marriage. We purchased a larger house because she's obsessed with storage space, but this has essentially meant 2 bedrooms are no-go zones for me. They're simply full of her clutter. Once they were full, she started leaving things in my office, which I would have to move to not trip over. I tried to convince her for years to go get diagnosed with ADHD and start treatment, but she had a really negative view of ADHD. She viewed it similarly to how she views schizophrenia or psychosis. Not that there's anything wrong with these conditions, but she believes there is. A couple of months ago, she had a girls' night out, and she came home telling me that she might have ADHD. I mean, I had been telling her that for years, until she decided that she would have a meltdown every time I brought up ADHD. I first figured it was because she was 30 minutes late, and it caused an issue with her friend. But no. She described her frustrations to her friends, and one of them told her that she might have ADHD. A bit of a side note, but when I said it, it was the worst insult imaginable to her. When her friend said it, it was helpful commentary. Well, my wife finally got herself diagnosed the day before yesterday. She came home from the doctor talking about how it explained everything. I responded that I felt I was owed an apology. She was initially confused, but I responded that if she had actually addressed this when I asked her all those years ago, I wouldn't have had to live with the constant stress of her chronic tardiness, clutter, emotional outbursts, and so on. She responded by shrieking at me, and now she's refusing to even have a word. I feel like I may have taken it too far, but were my words towards her justifiable? Update 1. So after the whole situation where I said I felt owed an apology, my wife did what she usually does when she's upset. She buried herself in distractions. She started deep cleaning random parts of the house, but only in patches. Like she scrubbed the bathroom sink until it looked brand new, but the mirror still had toothpaste splatters all over it. Then she started reorganizing the kitchen cabinets, but left half the stuff on the counters and just stopped. She wasn't talking to me at all unless it was necessary, and even then it was clipped responses like, "I'm fine," or "Yeah, whatever." At first I thought I'd just give her space. I figured she needed time to process everything, the diagnosis, my comment, all of it. But after a few days of her treating me like I wasn't even in the house, I decided to try talking to her again. I started by saying I didn't mean to hurt her, but I just wanted to express how hard it's been for me, too. I told her I understood that getting diagnosed was a big deal for her, and I was glad she finally had answers. She didn't say much, just nodded, but at least she wasn't ignoring me anymore. A few days later, she told me she had signed up for therapy and was looking into medication for ADHD. I thought, finally progress. But here's the twist. She also said she wanted us to go to couples therapy because she felt like I wasn't supporting her enough. That threw me for a loop. I mean, I've been dealing with her chaotic habits for years, trying to help her see that there might be something bigger going on, and now she's saying, I'm not supportive. I asked her what she meant by that, and she said I've been too focused on how her behavior affects me instead of understanding how much she's been struggling. I didn't know what to say to that because, on one hand, yeah, I get that she's been struggling. But on the other hand, I've been the one picking up the slack, cleaning up her messes, and dealing with her outbursts. I asked her if she thought it was fair to expect me to just bottle all that up and never express how it's impacted me. She said it's not about bottling it up. It's about approaching it with more empathy. Honestly, I felt like we were just talking in circles. We started couples therapy a week later. The therapist is nice enough, but I could tell right away that my wife had come prepared. She had this whole list of things she wanted to talk about, and most of them were about how I make her feel small when I bring up her clutter or how I don't give her credit for trying to change. I was sitting there like, trying to change? You literally ignored me for years when I suggested ADHD might be the issue. But I didn't say that, because I didn't want to come off as combative. The therapist asked me how I felt about all this, so I told them the truth. I said I love my wife, but I've been feeling burnt out. I explained how I've been picking up the pieces for years, and how frustrating it was that she only took the ADHD idea seriously when her friend brought it up. I said it felt like my efforts and observations weren't valued, and that hurt. My wife started crying, which made me feel like the biggest jerk in the world, but I stayed calm and said I wasn't trying to attack her. I just needed her to understand where I was coming from. After the session, my wife was quiet on the way home. When we got back, she said she needed time to think and went to her clutter room. I didn't press her. A couple of hours later, she came out and said she was sorry for ignoring my feelings all these years. She said she realized she had been dismissive and defensive and that it wasn't fair to me. That was the apology I had been waiting for, but instead of feeling relieved, I just felt tired. I told her I appreciated the apology, but I also needed to see actions, not just words. She said she understood and that she was committed to working on herself and our marriage. She even suggested we tackle the clutter together, starting with one of the no-go rooms. I agreed, but honestly, I'm skeptical. We've been down this road before where she says she'll change, and things get better for a few weeks before going back to the way they were. The next day, we started working on one of the rooms. It was a lot. There were boxes of stuff she hadn't touched in years, old clothes, random craft supplies, papers, even unopened packages. At one point, she found a journal from high school and got completely sidetracked reading it while I was trying to sort things into keep, donate, and trash piles. I had to remind her to stay focused a couple of times, but to her credit, she didn't snap at me like she usually would. We managed to clear about half the room before she got overwhelmed and said she needed a break. I was frustrated, but I didn't push her because I didn't want to ruin the progress we'd made. She promised we'd finish the rest the next day, but guess what? The next day came, and she found a million excuses to avoid it. First, she had to run errands. Then, she said she wasn't feeling well. By the time evening rolled around, she said she was too tired. I'm trying to be patient because I know this isn't an overnight fix, but part of me wonders if we're just doomed to keep repeating this cycle. I don't want to give up on her or our marriage, but I also don't know how much longer I can keep doing this without completely losing my mind. Update 2. After the last update, things got weird. Like, really weird. My wife was trying, or at least pretending to try, to work on the clutter. We had a few more sessions of couples therapy, which were helpful-ish, but I started noticing something off about her behavior. It's hard to explain, but it felt like she was constantly on edge. Normally, she's scatterbrained and disorganized, but now she was hyper-focused on the wrong things, like obsessively reorganizing the pantry 5 times in a week or spending hours researching how to declutter instead of actually doing it. It was like she was trying so hard to prove something but didn't know what. Then came the meltdown. She had promised to finish cleaning the second clutter room by the weekend. I kept reminding her, and every time she'd say, Yeah, I'll get to it. Saturday came, and instead of tackling the room, she decided it was the perfect time to alphabetize the spice rack. I brought up the clutter room again, and she completely flipped out. She started yelling about how I don't appreciate her efforts and how I'm always on her case. I tried staying calm and told her I wasn't trying to nag. I just wanted us to follow through on what we agreed. That's when she said something that stopped me cold. Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with being right all the time, we wouldn't even be in this mess. I didn't even know how to respond to that. Like what? I'm obsessed with being right? I'm not the one who's been avoiding dealing with this for years. But instead of arguing, I just walked away because I knew if I said anything else, it would turn into a full-blown fight. The next day, she apologized for yelling, but still insisted that I was pushing too hard. She said the ADHD diagnosis was overwhelming, and she needed time to process everything. I told her I understood, but I also couldn't keep waiting indefinitely for her to make changes. I said it felt like she was using the diagnosis as an excuse to avoid accountability, and that set her off again. She said I didn't understand how hard it was for her, which, okay, fair. I don't have ADHD, so I can't fully understand. But at the same time, I've been living with the consequences of her ADHD for years, so I think I'm allowed to feel frustrated. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and things kinda calmed down. She started taking ADHD meds, which seemed to help a little. She was less irritable and more willing to talk about stuff without shutting down. We even managed to finish clearing out the second clutter room together. I was cautiously optimistic, thinking maybe we were finally turning a corner. But then, I found something that made me question everything. While I was sorting through one of her boxes, I found a stack of letters. They weren't addressed to me, and they didn't look recent. Curious, and honestly a little suspicious, I opened one. It was from a guy named Alex. The letters weren't romantic or anything, but they were weird. They talked about projects they'd worked on together, inside jokes, and how much he missed their brainstorming sessions. There was no clear timeline, but it was obvious they'd been close at some point. When I asked my wife about it, she froze. Then she tried to brush it off, saying Alex was an old friend from college, and the letters were just random keepsakes. But the way she said it felt off, like she was hiding something. I asked why she never mentioned Alex before, and she got defensive, saying it wasn't a big deal and I was overreacting. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. So, I did something I'm not proud of. I looked through the rest of the letters when she wasn't around. Most of them were harmless, but one stood out. It was from Alex, dated a couple of years before we got married, and it said something like, "I hope you're happy with your decision, even if it means we can't be what we used to be." What the hell does that even mean? I confronted her again, this time with the letter. She got upset and said I had no right to go through her stuff, which, okay, fair. But I told her I wouldn't have felt the need to snoop if she'd just been honest with me. She admitted that Alex was someone she had feelings for before we got together, but insisted it was ancient history and didn't mean anything now. She swore nothing ever happened between them, and that I was making a big deal out of nothing. I want to believe her, but the timing feels sketchy. If it was really ancient history, why keep the letters all these years? And why get so defensive about them? It feels like there's a piece of the puzzle I'm missing, and it's driving me crazy. To make things even more complicated, she's been acting extra nice to me lately, like overly affectionate and trying to do little things to make me happy. Normally, I'd appreciate it, but now it just feels weird, like she's trying to distract me or make me forget about the letters. At this point, I don't know what to think. Am I being paranoid, or is there something she's not telling me? Should I let it go and focus on moving forward, or should I keep digging? Part of me wants to trust her, but another part feels like I'd be an idiot to ignore my gut on this.